When Thomas Mercier came out of the Aokigahara forest after 3 days, he could no longer speak. Not because he didn't want to, but because some things you see break something inside you, something that never really heals. For 2 weeks, he remained mute, his eyes fixed on a point in space that no one else could see. And when he finally spoke, his voice was different, hollow, as if a part of him had stayed there. He said only one sentence. "They're still there. All of them. They never leave." You know that feeling. When you walk into an empty room, but you really know, that someone was there just a second ago. That presence that hangs in the air. Multiply that by 1,000, by 10,000. That's what Thomas felt the moment he entered Aokigahara. But let's go back to the beginning. March 2019. Thomas Mercier was 32 years old, a French journalist specializing in paranormal phenomena. He'd spent years searching for proof. Ghosts, spirits, something that would prove death isn't the end. He wanted to believe, needed to believe, because his sister had died 2 years earlier. Cancer, 28 years old. And Thomas couldn't accept that she was just gone, disappeared, forever. So he searched, and his search led him to Aokigahara, the most haunted forest in the world, the Suicide Forest, at the base of Mount Fuji, 35 square kilometers, where light almost never reaches the ground, where the silence is so deep it hurts your ears. The Japanese call it Jukai, the sea of trees. And every year, dozens of people enter, to die, to disappear, to never be found again. Thomas thought he understood. Depression, pain, the need to escape. He thought it was just a place, just trees, just human tragedy. He didn't know yet, didn't know that some places absorb pain, keep it, transform it into something else, something that waits. The first day, 10 in the morning, clear sky. Thomas had a GPS, a compass, his camera, and orange ribbon, that bright little thing he unrolled behind him like Ariadne's thread, his link to return, to home, to reality. Local authorities insisted on the ribbon. Without it, they said, people get lost, even with marked trails, even in broad daylight. Thomas had smiled. He was prepared. He knew what he was doing. The first 10 meters into the forest changed everything. The silence came first, not normal silence. This was heavy, oppressive, like the forest swallowed all sound. No birds. You realize how important birds are only when they're gone. Their absence creates a void that makes you understand something is wrong. Fundamentally wrong. No insects. No rustling leaves. No wind. Just silence. And the sound of his own heart beating in his ears. Boom. 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 Getting louder as he went deeper. The ground was covered in moss. Thick. Black. It muffled his steps, like walking on something alive that absorbs every movement. And the trees. God, the trees. Twisted. Intertwined. Like skeletal hands reaching for a sky they could never touch. 20 minutes in, the GPS stopped working. The screen flickered. Searched. Searched. Nothing. Thomas shook the device. Rational logic, volcanic soil, rich in iron, interferes with magnetic fields. He knew this, had read about it, but knowing why something happens doesn't make the fear less real. He looked at the compass. The needle spun, slowly, as if searching for something that no longer existed. North, south, east, west, all had become the same direction. Nowhere. Thomas took a deep breath. No panic. He had the ribbon. He could always go back. He continued. Around noon, he heard the voices. Have you ever heard someone call your name when you're alone? That moment when you stop, certain you heard something, but there's no one there? Now imagine that. But it's not your name. It's words in a language you don't understand. And they come from everywhere. Front, behind, above, below. Whispers carried by a wind that didn't exist. Thomas stopped, closed his eyes, listened. The voices were soft, almost tender, but there was something in the tone, something pleading, desperate, like someone drowning and calling for help. Again and again, knowing no one will come, he opened his eyes, kept walking. The orange ribbon unrolled, a small point of color in all that darkness. His hope, That's when he saw the rope, old, rotting, tied to a branch, hanging in the void. You know what it had held. You don't need me to say it. You know. Thomas raised his camera, took a photo, but his hands were shaking, and it wasn't the cold, though it was cold. Too cold for March. The kind of cold that comes from inside, that settles in your bones and never leaves. The following hours lost their meaning. You know that feeling when you're sick with fever, when time becomes elastic, when 5 minutes feel like hours and hours pass in seconds. That was it. Thomas looked at his watch. 5 minutes. But he would have sworn he'd walked for an hour. Then he looked again. 2 hours had disappeared. Where? How? Time doesn't work normally in Aokigahara, as if the forest existed in its own dimension, its own rhythm. Close your eyes now. Take a deep breath. Imagine you're there, in that forest, alone, the silence pressing on you from all sides like water. And something you can't see, is watching you. The first night came too fast. Thomas found a small cleared space, set up his tent. His hands moved on autopilot, because his brain was elsewhere, was busy trying to understand why every fiber of his being was screaming at him to leave, to run, now. But he couldn't. Not yet. He had to see, had to understand. For his sister, for himself, to know if the dead really stay somewhere. He was going to find out. Oh yes, he was going to find out. Night fell like a black curtain, not gradually, just black, and with it came the sounds. Footsteps. Have you ever been alone in your house at night and heard someone walking upstairs? That moment of absolute terror before you realize it's just the house settling? Now imagine that. But you're in a tent, in a forest, miles from any civilization, and the footsteps don't stop. Crunch, 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 on the mossy ground, circling around his tent, again and again, the same circle. For hours, Thomas lay in his sleeping bag, completely still, barely breathing, listening. The footsteps never got closer, never moved away, just that constant circle. Like a clock. Tick, tock, tick, tock. He didn't sleep. Not for a second. How could he? When you know, you absolutely know, that something is walking around your tent. Something that doesn't need rest. That doesn't need to stop. At dawn, when the first gray light filtered through, Thomas opened his tent with trembling hands. The ground around the tent was untouched. Not a single footprint. Not a mark. Nothing. But he'd heard them. He knew what he'd heard, except now he had to wonder, do the dead leave footprints? The second day brought a new horror. Thomas found the camps, multiple, scattered through the forest like open graves, tattered tents, moldy sleeping bags, abandoned backpacks, and in each, personal belongings. A book, half-read, open to the page where someone had stopped. A toothbrush, still damp, as if its owner had just used it. Shoes, neatly arranged, as if someone intended to return, but no one had ever returned. Thomas opened one of the bags. Inside a diary, in Japanese. He couldn't read the words, but he didn't need to. The drawings spoke a universal language, the language of terror. Page 1, trees. Normal, innocent. Page 5, shapes among the trees. Blurry, indistinct. Page 10, the shapes had faces now. Or rather, places where faces should have been. Voids. Darkness. Page 15. The drawings were frantic. Lines everywhere. The figures were getting closer. Pressing in. The artist had drawn them so close their shapes overlapped with the edges of the page. The last page showed a person. Surrounded. The figures almost touching. And across the page, a single word in English. A word the artist must have written so someone, anyone, would understand. Stay. Thomas's hands shook so badly, he dropped the journal. If you're enjoying this story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more terrifying tales like this one. And in the comments, tell us what story you want to hear next. The second night, Thomas began seeing them. You know what it's like to see something out of the corner of your eye. That quick movement. And when you turn your head, there's nothing. You tell yourself it was your imagination, your brain filling in empty spaces. But what happens when it keeps happening? When every time you look away, there's a movement, A shape, a shadow that shouldn't be there? At some point, you have to ask yourself, is it really my imagination? Or am I actually seeing them? Thomas saw shapes gliding between the trees. Tall, thin, moving in a way that wasn't quite natural. Too fluid, like smoke, like dreams. And the voices returned. But this time, he could understand some words. Not in French, not in Japanese. In an older language, one your body understands even if your mind doesn't. Stay. You're tired. Stay. It's peaceful here. Silence. Rest. Eternal peace. Stay with us. Thomas wanted to leave. Followed his orange ribbon, his thread of hope. But the ribbon was leading him deeper, always deeper, into parts of the forest where the trees were so tight he had to squeeze between them, where the moss was so thick it came up to his knees, where the darkness was so complete he couldn't see his hand in front of his face. And he realized something terrible. The ribbon wasn't leading him back. It had never led anyone back. The forest was using it as a trap. People trusted the ribbon, followed the ribbon, and the ribbon led them exactly where the forest wanted them to be. The third day, Thomas met the man, or what had been a man. He was sitting against a tree, eyes open, staring. His skin was paper white, almost translucent. You could see the veins underneath. Blue, black, not at all like living veins. He was breathing, but not like you and me. His lungs rose once every minute, maybe less, as if breathing had become optional, a habit he hadn't quite abandoned yet. Thomas wanted to run, but his legs wouldn't move. So he spoke. His voice was broken, hoarse. "How long have you been here?" The man smiled. That was the worst part, the smile, because he was happy. "I don't know," he said. His voice was like dead leaves. "Time doesn't mean anything here. A day, a year, a century. All the same. All the same." Thomas asked, "Why don't you leave?" The smile widened. "Leave? Why would I leave? They take care of me. The Yurei, the spirits, everyone who died here, everyone who couldn't leave. They want company. They're so lonely, so terribly lonely." The man raised a hand, pointed to the trees. "Everywhere. You see them now, don't you? They've chosen you, like they chose me, like they choose everyone who enters deep enough. You never really leave. A part of you always stays, and that part calls until the rest of you comes back." Thomas ran then, abandoned everything, his equipment, his camera, everything. He ran through the forest, following the orange ribbon, even when he knew it was a trap, because it was all he had. And that's when he really saw them. Hundreds, maybe thousands, suspended among the trees, like macabre decorations. Some hung from ropes that no longer existed. Others simply floated, all pale, all watching, all calling. And Thomas understood, really understood. The Aokigahara forest wasn't a place of death. It was a place where death never really came, where people got trapped between life and death, aware, forever. He doesn't remember how he got out. His next memory is waking up at the forest's edge. 3 days had passed. His phone was miraculously working. He called for help. At the hospital, they found nothing wrong, physically. But Thomas couldn't speak. Because how do you explain what you saw? How do you describe something that breaks all understanding of reality? When he finally spoke, 2 weeks later, he told the doctors what he'd understood. For every person who leaves the forest, someone else must stay. It's the balance, the forest's rule. 3 days after Thomas left the hospital, a hiker entered Aokigahara. He never came out. Thomas never talks about the forest now. But every year, on March 15th, he disappears for 24 hours. His wife stopped asking where he goes, because she knows. She sees it in his eyes, in the way he sometimes looks out the window as if listening to something. And when he comes back, his shoes are always covered in that black moss, the kind that only grows in one place, because a part of Thomas never really left Aokigahara. A part of him still walks through that forest, listening to the voices, seeing the shadows, waiting for the day he has to return, forever. This is the true story of Thomas Mercier and the Aokigahara forest, a place where the dead never really die. where time has no meaning, where the only way out is to leave a part of yourself behind. And if you ever hear the voices calling you, if you ever feel that pull toward the forest, resist, because some places never let you go, even if you come out alive.